Let's speak more now on this particular development, and we are joined by Freedom Under Law research consultant, Chris Oxtoby. Chris, good evening to you, and thank you very much for your time. Let me start the conversation with this question. How much damage is being done to the reputation and standing of the judiciary as a direct result of the individual conduct of some judges?
Good evening. I think unquestionably there is damage being done by hearing these kind of allegations. Of course, the tribunal hearing this week, hearing these allegations against Judge Mbenenge comes hot on the heels of a finding on the weekend from a previous conduct tribunal that Gauteng High Court Judge Nana Makubela had committed gross misconduct. So it unquestionably does form part of a pattern where judges are being held to account for serious misconduct, which may potentially lead to them being removed from office. I think there's no doubt about that. I think, on the other hand, it is really important that complaints of this severity are seen to be taken seriously. I think the public nature of the hearings, whilst it's uncomfortable, is certainly important so that we can see that there is a proper process to hold them to account. And I think lastly, just we of course have to bear in mind that as far as the proceedings in the current tribunal for Judge President Mbenenge is concerned, of course it is still ongoing, and we have some way to go in terms of the evidence that is going to be heard. So the outcome remains to be seen. But unquestionably, people, I'm sure, will be looking at this and thinking this is not the way in which we expect our judges to behave.
And that's a question I want to lead to next. In the eyes of ordinary citizens, judges are supposed to be people of unquestionable integrity, because these are the people, when I, as a member of the public, do wrong, I will be sent to jail for a very long time by a judge. And so I'm avoiding using I'm avoiding using hyperbole here, but you almost see judges as demigods, people who can't do wrong. So when their reputation comes under question, do members of the public lose respect for judges?
I mean, that's a tricky question. I suppose, one can ask, well, do they lose respect because these allegations are made, or are people reassured by the fact that we actually are having an inquiry into these allegations, and that they may potentially lead to an offending judge who has fallen short of those standards actually being removed from office? So I think that question can cut both ways. I think what it does show is that it is extremely important that we have a process for dealing with these kind of serious complaints against judges that is effective, that is transparent, and that people can look at and have some confidence that when judges fall short of that, as you say, demigod status, that it's not something that is swept under the carpet, and that serious consequences do follow if that misconduct is proved to have happened.
Yeah, we already have cases that we can now refer to. There is the former judge president of the Western Cape, John Hlophe. There is another case of a judge whose name will come to my mind in a moment, who were impeached last year. And this was for the very first time in a democratic South Africa. Do you think that things are going to lead in that direction for at least the one judge that we now know has been found guilty of misconduct, Judge Nana Makubele?
That's a tricky question. I think the complaint against Judge Makubele is a fairly complicated one. It relates to her position on the board of PRASA at the same time as she had been appointed as a judge. It was a complaint that took, I believe, in the region of 6 years to be brought to finality. The tribunal went on for a long period of time. So I think those of us who were watching that were a little bit surprised when we got a very short 15-page decision from the Conduct Tribunal hearing that matter. In terms of the process, that finding by that tribunal now has to be considered by the full Judicial Service Commission. If the full Judicial Service Commission agrees that she should be removed from office, it then has to go to Parliament for Parliament to vote. So the short point is that there's quite a lot of road that needs to be walked in that matter before she would actually be removed from office. And bearing in mind what seems to be quite a short decision from the Conduct Tribunal in that case, I wouldn't want to judge that one as finished too quickly.
Yeah.
It is conceivable that the other bodies that have to look at it may take a different view, but equally it is possible, and it's a step on the way to removal from office. But I think the metaphorical jury is still out a bit on whether that really does happen.
Yeah. Two more questions, Chris, before I let you go. So you've spoken on Judge Nana Makubele, who has been found guilty of misconduct. Judge Selby Mbenenge, his matter is ongoing, but the nature of the complaint against him is such that matters of sexual harassment, sexual misconduct, and immediately you also think GBV, which is a massive scourge in the country. It is a pandemic. The president has declared it as such. Might he, let's presume for a moment that he were to be cleared of this. People, though, cannot unhear what came out of the actual hearing. And by the way, these are being held publicly. The journalists are allowed to record and actually broadcast what has been said. Do you think it'll be difficult for people to ever look at this judge president in the same way? And I guess my question is, can he remain on the bench even after this episode?
Well, that's a very good question. I mean, it touches on some of the issues that were raised when the tribunal initially made a decision that some parts of it would be held in private, and of course, as it's transpired now, all of the proceedings are in the open. And I think that concern that you're raising is that even if he may be formally acquitted, the reputational damage would remain. Is what had prompted the decision to try and close off some of those proceedings. I think, look, it's a tricky balance to strike in terms of what the impact on his reputation and his respect in the public eye if he was nevertheless acquitted. It's hard to tell. I think obviously a lot would depend on the reasons. A lot would depend on what his evidence is going to be. As I say, we're very early into this tribunal. Still, we haven't had the complainant be cross-examined. We haven't heard the judge president's evidence. So I suppose a lot would depend on what comes out of that, and that might possibly shift opinions. But it would undoubtedly have a stain. I think that may ultimately just be an unavoidable consequence of the fact that we want complainants in these kind of cases to be able to come forward. We want these hearings to take place. We don't want these kind of complaints to be swept under the carpet. And frankly, I think the judiciary will to an extent just have to ride out some of the reputational consequences of that, because the consequences of an approach on the other extreme, where these kind of allegations are swept aside and are not looked into, I think would be extremely problematic as well.
Final question, Chris. The Chief Justice, the current Chief Justice, she is quite new in her position, and she walks into this. How much work do you think she has ahead of her to make sure that the integrity of the judiciary is upheld?
I think an enormous amount of work on many fronts. This is one of them. There are there are many other aspects where we can expect the judiciary to come under, for example, a great deal of pressure in dealing with politically charged controversies that end up in court. The system of appointing judges comes under regular scrutiny, and that's going to be important for the Chief Justice to deal with. And these kind of complaints against judges and the process, I think we've already seen in this particular tribunal some of the challenges that dealing with complaints against judges presents. The Chief Justice has an enormous task, I think, to keep the judiciary above water in this context. I don't envy it, but it's important that she does the best she can and receives the support that she needs from other judges and from the broader legal community.
Yeah, lots of work ahead for the Chief Justice. Thank you very much for your time. Chris Oxtoby is from Freedom Under Law, a research consultant within that organization.